Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Eddie Byrne Center. Before we start, I just want to make some acknowledgments. Up in the front row here, we have Fred Watts. He's the Executive Director of PAL. Fred, thank you for hosting us today. Cindy Lewis is the Director of the Byrne Center. Cindy, thank you very much. Marcel Brathwaite is the Director of Community Engagement. Marcel, thank you. And then Quincy Dunlap is the Citywide Director of PAL. So just want to do that right up front. Good afternoon, everyone. As I said, thanks for being here, and welcome to the Police Officer Eddie Byrne PAL Center, a fitting place to talk about New York City's incredible drop in crime over the decades. Eddie's assassination in 1988 was a message from brazen drug dealers. No one in New York City was safe, not even a uniformed cop sitting in his patrol car, guarding the home of a witness to a drug case. We got the message, and Eddie's murder became a turning point. That year, there were 1,896 murders in New York City. Last year, we had 335. I really can't overstate how amazing that drop is, to say nothing of the lowest number of shootings ever that we continue to see week after week, month after month, and year after year. In fact, in almost every category across the board, we're down in crime, and we keep pulling illegal guns off the street. None of this is by accident. It's all due to the hard work of the men and women of the NYPD, who every single day continue to focus on our primary mission of fighting crime and keeping all New Yorkers safe. And again, as I say, we don't do this by ourselves. We do it in conjunction with all of our law enforcement partners and all of the prosecutors across the city. And our cops do this at great risk to themselves. Eddie Byrne's father had been an NYPD officer, and Eddie's brother Larry, who is here with us today, is the NYPD's current Deputy Commissioner for Legal Matters. It's a family legacy that will never be forgotten by this department or by this city. And as we forge ahead, many of you have heard me say this before, public safety is a shared responsibility. I truly believe that. It's a shared responsibility between your police and everyone who lives and works and visits our great city. And through our neighborhood policing philosophy, we're taking crime fighting to the next level. This model of policing brings the police and our communities together as partners and allows us to work toward the common mission of protecting this great city and everyone in it. The idea is simple. No one knows a neighborhood or a street or a block better than those who live and work there every day. The NYPD's plan puts the same patrol officers in the same small sectors of specific neighborhoods every day. That way, the public is getting to know its cops, and our cops are getting to know individuals too. The goal is to expand dialogue, and the bottom line is we want everyone in our city to be safe. Not only be safe, but to feel safe. And we take enforcement action. We do it when and where it will promote public safety the best. We call that precision policing. And it means we're focusing our resources in a way that continues to make a difference. Because it's really only a very small percentage of criminals in any one community that commits most of the violence. And it's those criminals we're closing in on with astounding success. Last year, we conducted about 100 gang and crew takedowns and locked up about 1,000 people in those takedowns, and many of them are still in jail. Bob Boyce, after Dermot speaks today, will speak about what we've done so far with gang and crew takedowns in 2017. That's how we've been disrupting drug dealing and other criminal acts, including the shootings and the retaliation that comes with such activity. I want to urge all New Yorkers to remember that while NYPD police officers do an incredible job of identifying patterns, stopping crime, and catching bad guys, it's those of you who reside in these neighborhoods every day who really know what doesn't look right. You know who's disrupting the good order of our city. Because in the end, all of what we're doing isn't just for the public. It isn't just done for the public. It's done with the public. Before I turn it over to the mayor, I'd like to remind you that today is the 2-year anniversary of the murder of NYPD police officer Brian Moore, who was assigned to the 105 precinct in Queens. 2 days prior to his passing at the corner of 212th Street and 104th Road, only about 3 miles from here, Brian spotted a man he thought he had a gun. He told the man to stop walking, and this violent criminal shot Brian in the head. So as you go through today, please think about Brian and think about his family. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I want to second your comments. This is a day we should be thinking about Officer Brian Moore and his family and all they have gone through. Commissioner, it is a pleasure to be here with you to celebrate another step forward for the NYPD. another month of great success. I want to congratulate you. I want to congratulate all the senior leadership here, First Deputy Commissioner Tucker and Chief of Detectives Boyce, Chief of Department Gomez. Also want to congratulate the commanding officer of the 113 precinct, Inspector Frederick Grover, for the great work the men and women at his command have done, and all the other NYPD leadership and officers present. We thank you, because this is something to celebrate. Today, let's face it, New York City is safer today than anyone could have imagined just a few years ago. And it's because of hard work. It's because of the right strategies. It's because of precision policing. It's because there's 2,000 more officers on the streets. There's a lot of reasons, but they all add up to the same reality. We are safer than we ever could have imagined, and we will be safer even more in the future. The first quarter of 2017, the safest quarter on record in the history of New York City. And that trend has now continued in the month of April. In this last month, April 2017, we saw the lowest overall crime and the fewest murders of any April in the history of New York City. This is really impressive what the NYPD has achieved. A 6.8% drop in index crimes compared to last April, and a 28% reduction in murders compared to last April. We always are honest about the things that still need work. We did see one more shooting this April than last April, at this point last year. But we know overall there's been tremendous progress on reducing shootings in this city. Neighborhood policing is taking hold more and more. It's a work in progress, but it's already proving its positive impact, as we discussed with you a few weeks ago. Now, body cameras are going to be an important part of the equation going forward, and a lot of you were there for the historic day up in Washington Heights when we started using body cameras for the first time with our patrol officers. I have to tell you, I've talked to a lot of people around this city who really believe this is a new era in policing, because we're going to have that transparency and accountability. And a lot of people believe, rightfully, it's going to be important to drawing police and community even closer together. A reminder, all patrol officers will have body cameras by the end of 2019. And at the same time as we're adding more accountability, more transparency, more reforms, we're already seeing what the effects of the reforms so far have been. We now know that the year 2016, we had the fewest complaints against police officers in 15 years. This is very, very important. This is one of the clear measures that the relationship between police and community is improving as we see the number of complaints going down, and that there's better communication and better mutual respect. We know this is in large measure due to improved training, and all of the leaders up here believe in it fundamentally. I want to thank First Deputy Commissioner Tucker for leading the way on creating a new approach to training. This has helped improve the relationship, and the people are speaking now. As they're working with NYPD in a different approach, they feel a lot better about it. And there's less that they're choosing to complain about. And that's good for everyone. That's good for our officers, and that's good for our community members alike. When you combine a better relationship with record low crime, there's so much to be thankful for. And it's a moment when we especially have to be thankful. This is a week where we are going to be very focused on remembering those we have lost, our officers who laid down their lives to protect all of us. The NYPD Memorial Day ceremony will be tomorrow, time when we remember all of the heroes lost over years. And also, we think today of two in particular. One, Detective Brian Moore, who, as the commissioner said, 2 years ago this very day, and remember, he was only 25 years old. This was a young man of tremendous promise, tremendous energy, with a whole life ahead. So we honor him. And also, because of where we are right now, we remember Officer Eddie Byrne. This extraordinary facility, this Police Athletic League facility, is a beautiful tribute to him. And I want to thank everyone at the Police Athletic League, because this is where you take someone's memory and you bring it to life. All of the young people who are being helped here, who are being inspired here, that's a living memorial to Officer Eddie Byrne and what he did for this city. And his brother is here, and Larry, I know you carry with you every day the memory of your brother, and you honor him through your work as well. And I thank you, and I thank your whole family for what you've done for this city. And I know you feel that this is one of the ways we honor him, is right here at this beautiful center. But there's another way that Eddie Byrne was honored. A federal government grant program was named after him. This is how meaningful it was that this young man laid down his life to defend others. He was seen as a hero in the entire nation. And the federal government saw fit to name after him the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, specifically to help cities all over the country fight crime and bring criminals to justice. And we get right now in New York City millions of dollars from the Justice Department under this grant program, and rightfully so. The NYPD that Eddie Byrne loves so much benefits and is able to do more to fight crime. I want everyone to understand this is specifically the funding that President Trump and Attorney General Sessions have threatened to cut off. And that's not irony. That's a disservice to the name of Eddie Byrne, that they would threaten to take away funding from the NYPD he loves so much and threaten to literally withhold the grant money named after him from going to his own hometown. That's something everyone knows we are already fighting, and we believe we will win that fight. It's a pertinent day, to say the least, with the President arriving later today in our city, to say to him, when you threaten to cut public safety funding for political purposes, you only make people less safe. You only make it harder for our heroes to do their job. And it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't defend the interests of the people of this city. And it certainly doesn't honor the memory of those who sacrificed so much. And it certainly doesn't honor the memory of Eddie Byrne. So again, we'll continue that fight, and we intend to win it. I have to say one other thing about the legacy of Officer Eddie Byrne. He served in Southeast Queens, cared deeply for the people of this community, gave his life in their defense. Well, he'd be proud also, I believe, to see what the men and women of the 113 precinct have done in their results. Just looking at this last month are outstanding. In this precinct, in the last April compared to a year ago, a 20%, almost a 20% reduction in index crime. That's absolutely outstanding. This is a precinct that's involved in the front line of the neighborhood policing initiative. The NCOs are here, and they're proving what an impact they could make. So the legacy of Eddie Byrne also lives on, because the men and women who have succeeded him are every day doing more and more to protect their fellow New Yorkers, and they're succeeding. So, look, we are the safest big city in America. We intend to be even safer. It's as simple as that. Quick few words in Spanish. Gracias al NYPD, el mes pasado nuestra ciudad tuvo la menor cantidad de crímenes y homicidios para un mes de abril. La semana pasada también anunciamos el primer grupo de cámaras corporales para nuestros oficiales de policía. Esto representa un gran paso en el plan policial de vecindad para que nuestra ciudad sea aún más segura. With that, it's my honor to turn to the man with all the numbers, Deputy Commissioner, well, no, you're now Chief. I got to get that right. Chief of Operations, Dermot Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. For the month of April, overall index crime was down 6.8%. That's about approximately 550 fewer index crimes for this April versus last. As you look to the chart, the first of three charts on either my right or my left, you can see the overall trending of major index crime in New York City continuing to go down. As the mayor alluded to, 68 shooting incidents versus 67. That was an increase of 1. And when you look at any other category that had an increase during April, you'll find that rape, we recorded 5 additional rapes this year versus last. The remainder of the index crimes saw decreases, including decreases in overall housing and transit crime for April. That brings us 4 months into the year, with a third of the year through now. Overall down over 5% in major index crime for New York City. For the year to date, through those first 4 months, every category of index crime is down. Housing crime is down. Transit crime is still slightly up, and that's driven by grand larcenies. 3 of the first 4 months of this year, transit was down. In the month of March, they were up about 50 crimes, and it will take some time to recover from that. But all in all, very solid numbers. Whether we discuss property crime or we discuss violent crime, every category is down, as I alluded to. Every borough of New York City is down year-to-date in index crime. Queens, fitting, and as I look over at Chief Barrera and Inspector Freddie Grover, who are here, Queens is a particularly good story, as the mayor alluded to. Overall crime down in Queens, over 6% this year. Shooting incidents down 45% in the borough of Queens this year, Queens North and South combined. That number is 21 fewer shooting incidents in Queens, and that's over half this year's increase for New York City. So Queens is really leading the way, and Chief Barrera, Chief Holmes in Queens North, thank you for that leadership. And thank you especially to the Queens DA's office, because as we say, we can't do any of this alone. Overall, New York City this year, just to finish up with some violence statistics, we are down 16% in both shootings, and we are down 16% in recorded homicides, and that's through April 30th. This is not a coincidence that both of those numbers are moving down. It also didn't happen due to some inevitable coincidence or some crime trend that is going up and down that we cannot control. We are controlling this. This is what you are seeing is precision policing at its best. As you look at 2 more slides, first one, year-to-date overall crime, you see it again trending down and at the lowest levels. But I think this third slide, when you talk about the violence numbers in New York City, what you're looking at with that third slide is recorded homicides through April 30th, going back, looks like 15 years. And those are homicides by gunfire in New York City. When you look at that, 36, down from 49, down from 73. When you look at the percentages that we are dropping, that's 27% down in shooting homicides just since last year. It's 35% lower from 2013. So when we talk about precision policing, we know that we are not done. I think it's very fitting when we talk about 2 fallen heroes today and the sacrifices they made. It's in their honor that we continue to push forward. We still see pockets of crime in parts of this city. We still see disturbing trends of individuals arrested multiple times for carrying firearms. But when you hear now, and I'll turn it over to Bob Boyce and some of the active work that we have done and continue to do, you'll see exactly what we're doing to push these numbers even lower.
Morning, all. Part of what Dermot was talking about is our precision policing policy, our strategy, which targets the most violent criminals in the city, and also the narcotic dealers who are distributing heroin that's creating the overdose spike that we're seeing right now here and across the country. So to that end, we've done 43 major takedowns of major cases this year. 23 of those were gangs, 20 were narcotics. And when you look at the gangs, 313 people arrested. This is throughout the city. 8 in Brooklyn North, 8 in the Bronx, and throughout 4 here in Queens South as well. So this is distributed throughout the city, and it's targeting those persons who are driving our violence and the overdose rate in this city. Some of the significant seizures here thus far this year have been pretty dramatic. 1,878 kilos of cocaine were seized so far this year, 102 kilos of heroin by these takedowns, 148 firearms, almost $1 million in cash was also seized. Key here is also over 5 kilos of fentanyl, which is mixed with the heroin. It's just creating the overdose problems. This is what we have right now and where we're going. So tremendous work by members of my detectives. Combine that with the NCO program. We've done a really good job so far this year. And this is on a year. Last year, we were down tremendously as well.
All right. Thanks, Bob. I think we're going to open it up to questions about crime. Yeah. Hi.
Could you speak a little more about why rape is going up? Is it, and do you know if it's mostly domestic or strict violence?
When we divide the rapes that we have seen, and it's up 5 incidents, the preliminary numbers for April, but year to date we are down slightly in rape. When you look at the categories of stranger rapes, acquaintance rapes, and domestic rapes, 2 of the 3 are down: stranger rapes and domestic. The one category that is up is the acquaintance rapes. When we look at it and try to identify patterns throughout the city, we really don't see. This is cases of individuals that in some way know each other, oftentimes meeting, and then the rape occurs. But in terms of patterns, we really don't see it. And driving it, clearly we've mentioned before, there is an element of increased outreach to garner reports coming in, but to try to tie it exactly to that is very difficult. But it's something we take very seriously.
Just keep in mind, each and every allegation of rape is investigated by our Special Victims Division.
Of sexual assault?
We can follow up and get them to you.
Yeah.
Can you define precision policing?
Sure. Precision policing is, and we've spoken about this for a couple of years now. There's a very small percentage of the population in New York City is involved in violence and crime. And by combining our Organized Crime Control Bureau with our Detective Bureau and putting all of those detectives, that investigative ability, under Chief Boyce, we target our resources at those people involved in the violence. Yeah. Hi.
So the NYPD made more than 5,000 arrests for possession and sale of small amounts of marijuana in the first 3 months of this year. Do you think it's accurate to say that the NYPD is ending these types of arrests?
Let me start on that, because I think you're referring to what I said the other day. And again, you just said possession and sale. What we had focused on over the last couple of years was no longer arresting for low-level possession. That is different from sale. That is different from smoking marijuana in public. And the experts will describe the different charges to you. But we've been very consistent about moving away from arrest for low-level possession versus the other charges, which are entirely different.
Yeah, and that's a big change in the way we do policing, and it's important to remember that a lot of these complaints, a lot of these arrests are driven by 311 complaints and community complaints. In the back row.
I'm Joan Handy, and this is my neighborhood. And I wonder if any of you can address gang violence here in Queens. Does anyone know about it?
Sure. Bob Boyce, Chief of the Detectives, Bob Boyce will talk about that. As a matter of fact, we had Queens South in yesterday, and they did speak specifically about gang violence in Queens.
And these heroes seem to be for their service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to answer your question, ma'am, 2 of the gangs that we're and I don't like to name them in public to give them any kind of purpose at all. All right, but we were targeting 2 major gangs in Queens South. All right, and we had several takedowns in the Rockaway Peninsula over the last year to 2 years that have driven violence down, shootings down tremendously. So right now we're targeting 2 gangs, specific gangs in the 103 and 113 precinct that we've seen the most violence from, and we'll continue to do so. We did do a takedown on one of them, severely hampering them, taking off their top echelon, but we'll stay on top of that in this area.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to ask whether, in the same way that you track how many arrests or lead from CrimeStopper tips, do you have any way of tracking how many arrests have originated with a tip that came through the NCO program?
I don't think we're at that point yet, specifically with NCOs. I mean, we know who the NCOs are. The way they track what they do every day, we could probably call that out, but I don't think there's an automatic way to do that.
Is there Related for doing that?
Yeah, no, of course, as we move forward with neighborhood policing, we want to make sure that we're using all of our resources efficiently, and that would be part of it.
The claim that's made that this program is leading to solving crimes, there's no actual data that backs that up.
Well, I mean, there's interactions with our precinct detective squads. You know, we're getting a lot of information from the people that live and work in the neighborhoods and interact with our NCOs. Can I give you a finite number? Probably not, but anecdotally, we know that is the case.
Yeah, I want to just challenge that a little bit. We obviously presented the initial information on how crime reduction correlated to precincts with NCOs. We feel very confident about that correlation. It's a new program, so all of the research we need to do about it has just begun, and it's absolutely valid that we want to know that kind of thing, how many tips have come in proactively, because there is a different kind of dialogue between police and community. But I've had enough conversations myself with officers who have told me about tips they got because of having developed specific relationships that would not have been a part of their work previously, because they would previously have been going from job to job, not actually getting to know people at the community level. And so I know just from my small sample size, I've heard numerous examples of community members telling officers specifically about either where a weapon was, or on one case I remember a gunshot that was not in the shot spotter area, had not been called in, that they found out because someone called them to tell them about it, or if there's a problem between gangs, these type of things. That's just from my very small sample size. I believe from what the leadership of the NYPD are hearing, they're hearing a lot of those examples. We can put it into a quantifiable form as the program builds out. But as the non-expert here on the panel, I think there's no question that those kinds of things are happening all the time.
If I could speak to that, David, I don't know if you can call information given to one cop to another a tip, okay? I will say that our NCO program, we have a case management system. They are all trained and contribute investigative data to that. They're also trained in the criminal investigative course by the Detective Bureau. We consider them a key component. We use them to go out and get video feeds from the public, as well as canvassing with wanted photos. So a little splitting a hair here, but I don't know if they could call one cop to another cop something a tip.
Yeah, just in general. The first thing we do with these the neighborhood coordination officers is send them to the same course that Bob Boyce sends all his detectives to. This way they have that knowledge and that experience together. And they're out there. I'll give you one right in the 120 the other day. We had a shooting, and we were looking for a wanted perp. The neighborhood coordination officers knew the family, talked to the family, and they were able to get that wanted perp to come in and surrender. It's not quantifiable. It's nothing that goes on a checklist, but it's something that's done on a day-to-day basis, working hand in hand with Bob's detectives.
I believe the NYPD was not doing that kind of work before.
Not to the extent that it's doing now, because we're giving our officers the training and the time to make those connections, and that's what's important to helping us to continue to drive violence down. Tony?
In terms of the homicides year-to-date, do you have a percentage breakout as to how many are gang-related, domestic, in the course of a robbery or a sexual assault, or any other categories?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a rough number, and I'll have to get back to you, Tony. But in terms of shooting incidents first, before the homicides, generally speaking, and when the year ends, it'll bear out. When we look year over year, it's in that 40% range. It could be high 40s, mid 40s. So 45 to 50% of our shooting incidents generally will be gang related. It may not be necessarily a Crip shot a blood because of a gang dispute, but someone involved in that incident will be a gang member, nearly half. And again, that is what we know. We don't always know all parties involved in a shooting. So it is a significant number of our firearm incidents throughout New York City are dominated by gang violence. I can tell you that in speaking to Chief Gomez yesterday, today, and nearly every day, when we're talking about what's going on in New York City, it is almost always, in terms of gunfire, gang dominated. And that's any borough that you choose. And this is under the bigger umbrella and context of, again, shooting numbers that we have never seen before. But we are never satisfied with any numbers. So I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom here. We are really, in many ways, you could argue, leading the country in terms of reducing gang violence and shootings. But what exists currently is still gang dominated. Now, when you shift over to homicides, you don't see that high percentage. That percentage is going to drop, and generally when the year is over, it's going to be about a fifth to a quarter, so 20 to 25% will involve gang members by the end of the year. Again, not necessarily a homicide in furtherance of the gang, but somebody involved in that incident, either the victim or the perpetrator.
Domestic, in terms of homicides, are they a larger proportion now?
Domestics are usually, and this is years of data, we do see swings, but years of data, you could expect, if going by the past and learning from the past, about 18%, 20% of our homicides will be domestic. And just before we move off of domestic homicides, you know, domestic crime in New York City makes up about 11 to 12% of our index crime. It is a stubborn crime that we are continually trying to push lower. But when you look specifically at homicides involving domestics, we are at a very low place historically. One is too many, but that is a piece of very good news. When you look at the number of domestic homicides that we have in New York City, we've been able to push that number significantly down from just 5-10 years ago. So that is good news.
Hi, in the third row there.
Mr. Mayor, could you talk about the cost to the city when the president is in town, and in general the atmosphere with regards to the protests? And also, was the allotted funding to the city approved in the budget just passed, or was it passed part of fiscal year 2018?
So it's a couple of different pieces. The funding that is part of the continuing resolution, although there's still work to be done to actually get the funding, and there are other jurisdictions that also qualify in Florida and New Jersey. Just by looking at the sheer numbers, it's quite clear that we have ended up substantially whole for the time between Election Day and Inauguration Day, and that a lot of our needs for the time after the inauguration until present will be covered. So the reimbursement to the NYPD will be very substantial. There'll be more work to do up ahead, but that will be part of the continuing resolution because all of that is part of the current federal fiscal year that goes all the way to September. Now, when it comes to NYPD coverage of individual events, it's a whole different concept. NYPD has, and I'll speak to it, and obviously my colleagues can speak from their experience, but you know, the broad stroke reality is that NYPD has covered presidential visits for decades. That's been part of our responsibility to cover, obviously working with the Secret Service. On more structural things like the UN General Assembly, which is obviously the same amount every year, we get federal reimbursement on that. So each silo or bucket is different, but I think the most important thing is, you know, we fought long and hard to get reimbursement for the NYPD for the protection of Trump Tower. The final analysis, what the Congress is doing is going to make us substantially whole.
Is it over 300,000 though, the estimates of costs for each visit of Mr. Trump in the city?
I don't have the per visit cost, and again, this will be his first visit. We obviously have from President Obama a number of visits we can judge by, but again, those have historically been a local responsibility.
So just to that end, when he's not in town, we estimated it to be about 136,000. When he's in town, depending on the number of moves that are made, it's over 300,000. And if we just want to talk about the president's visit today, Chief Gomez, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. As you know, we work very closely with the Secret Service in planning and coordinating these presidential visits, and we were able to quickly adapt and adjust our resources to any changes, and certainly today that has been the case. There has been several changes to the schedule, but it is public knowledge that he will be at the Intrepid on the west side later this afternoon. So New York is, and especially motorists on the West Side Highway, you should expect some temporary disruptions in traffic. We have a lot of traffic agents in place in that area to assist. It's a very robust detail, as all presidential details are. We have some demonstrations that are planned at the Intrepid, and we have our strategic response group in place. They're trained and very well experienced in handling demos and protests, and they'll be mobile. in vehicles as well as bicycles. It's something new to the unit, and it's proven very effective in some recent protests. Being that it's on the Hudson, we have Harbor Patrol along with the Coast Guard patrolling. We'll be patrolling from above, but we expect a smooth day later this afternoon on the west side.
Tina?
For the commissioner, would you prefer that Trump never came to New York City?
I've been very consistent on this point. I think presidents of the United States are going to come to New York City. I don't think he's any different. I don't think he should be treated any different. I also have said that this is his hometown. I want to respect the fact that people have a right to come back to their hometown. What I hope he will do in the process, though, is listen to people and understand what his policies are doing to his hometown. And unfortunately, since he took office, a lot of what he's done is going to hurt New York City profoundly and has created a lot of fear and a lot of concern among New Yorkers. So when he comes back, I hope he doesn't just drive by the people in the neighborhoods that used to be a part of his life, but actually takes the opportunity to listen to people. But no one should tell him he can't come home. I don't think that's fair.
Yep.
Mayor, did the president invite you to spend today with him or any time this weekend? And if so, what?
No, he called me up. He said we need a lot of quality time together. No, the event was pre-arranged, meaning this gala, whatever it is tonight, was something that existed previously, and not something I typically would have gone to. And then later, it became clear the president would be attending. But there is not the kind of events that I've seen previously where the White House would organize something and invite local elected officials. There's obviously nothing like that on this program. So no such invitation came in.
Would you attend?
Look, this is what I'd say. I'm going to respect the office of the president if there's a civic gathering, if you will. There's something that is not about his political views, but is about his role as president of this country. I would, just as if George W. Bush was president and I was mayor of the city, I would go in my capacity as mayor. If there was an occasion to have a real conversation about the issues, I would take up that opportunity for sure. I'm saddened because, when I went to see him right after the election, my hope was that a lot of what he said in the campaign wouldn't prove to typify the way he would govern. I was hoping we would see something very, very different because I was so distressed by what he said in the campaign. Unfortunately, his approach to governing has been just as extreme as his approach to the campaign. So it's really hard to imagine where you could have a productive dialogue. But if ever there were such an opportunity, of course, I would give it a try.
A couple more police questions. If you have any more police questions,
Yep.
we move on. All right?
Police question related to stats as well. Congratulations, everyone, to the men and women in NYPD in blue for helping bring these crime stats down. Specific question, what is being done to remove illegal guns from the streets?
This is something that we talk about every day. And you're a reporter, so I'm sure you know very well what we do. It's not only the precision policing that we spoke about, it's our field intelligence officers, it's our men and women that are in the sectors every day, it's our NCOs. Everything that we do is pointed at driving violence and crime down, and specifically taking guns off the street.
I'd like Dermot to cite the statistics because there's been fantastic work on increasing gun seizures. And I want to note that this is part of the amazing story of the last few years. Fewer overall arrests and more guns taken off the streets at the same time. And I think it has to do a lot with developing a more trusting and open relationship with communities, more flow of information to our NCOs and other officers. I also think it has a lot to do with ShotSpotter, because ShotSpotter is now giving our officers evidence that they used to not have available to them of where a gun had been fired, and often leads them to the physical evidence that can lead to a gun seizure. So, Chief, if you would talk about what's going on with gun seizures, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, and to move away just from the numbers for a second and to combine two questions, if you will. Earlier question about what is precision policing, and now a question about guns. Our officers have put their lives on the line from the beginning of time, if you will, making gun arrests. One of the shifts in the last few years is how do we get more out of those gun arrests? And when you talk about metrics and being more efficient, increasing the prosecution from our end and what can we do differently. So you start to talk about increased indictments. You start to talk about increased evidence collection, increased sentencing on guns. So it's not just the gun arrests. We had a substantial increase in gun arrests last year, but what are we getting out of them and how can we efficiently remove individuals from the street that are carrying guns around the streets of New York City? There's no question to me. The men and women in the New York City Police Department are doing a phenomenal job in getting guns off the street. But that's been matched now by, in the last couple of years, by their evidence collection, by the enhancement of those arrests by our detective bureau. The amount that we ask from our cops and detectives in the last few years has gone up dramatically in this arena. And they have responded, and we're seeing some of the results. We see guns currently today in New York City that are being prosecuted that years ago wouldn't have been, quite frankly, due to the efforts of the NCOs and the patrol cops securing video, securing witnesses, the detectives getting statements, gathering DNA. So there is a lot of positive in this area. And again, it's not more arrests, it's not more gun arrests, it's how do we surgically remove the individuals that are carrying guns and using them off the streets for the benefit of all. So in that area, we've made great progress. We are not done. We still see areas that need improvement, and that's what we're working towards.
David.
On the civilianization question, where is the department now with civilianizing all the, how many positions do you have still outstanding that could be civilianized?
Yeah, I'm going to have to get you the numbers on that, but conceptually, we're looking to civilianize as many spots as possible. We're looking to get people that have shields and guns back out on the street. So we'll get numbers to you, David. Yeah.
Talk about the pockets of violence. Could you identify those pockets? And I'm curious where most of the gang shootings are happening.
I'll talk about
it. So when you look historically, unfortunately, 2/3 to 3/4 of the shootings going back happen in Brooklyn and the Bronx. And that's not that far off today, but we have made great strides in reducing the numbers. When you look across New York City now, the benefit of these numbers that we put up has been experienced in nearly every borough. This particular year, right at this point in time, Staten Island is having an influx of shootings. But when you look at where we have had success, it's literally across the city. We have gang issues throughout New York City, as probably most of the country does. Specifically, this particular point in time, despite being down almost 50%, I bet you if you asked Inspector Grover, who's standing over there, he would say that gangs are an issue for him. In Queens South here, specifically in the 103, the 113. We see it in the Rockaways. In Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, we see it, and Canarsie, we see it. So there are points throughout New York City. The very good news is those pockets, if you will, are shrinking, and we intend to shrink them further at an accelerated rate. Again, when you talk about the shooting numbers of last year, we finished at 997, first time under 1,000. Through April 30th, we're down 16% already. So these are, each number on its own is unprecedented, and we're managing to push it even further. So those pockets are shrinking. We've been very consistent the last couple of years in this message. If you carry a gun in New York City, we're going to find you, whether it's the NCO providing tips to the field intelligence officers, whether it's search warrants that we do. We're accomplishing all this at the same time that we are at almost 25-year low in arrests. And we can go on and talk about the stops and the criminal court summonses. That's the precision policing. It's surgical, it's precise, it's gathering the intelligence, and it's very effective.
Okay, two more on the police, and then we have to move on, all right?
Has the department put out the guidance on the right to know compromise or on the implementation of the Criminal Justice Reform Act? And if not, where are those in process?
Right to know is out there. The training is done. Moving from criminal summonses to civil summonses, that'll take place in the middle of June.
And on the right to know, sorry, and that's public, the guidance?
I'm not sure. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Commissioner and the mayor, the Brooklyn DA this morning said that overdose rates are 3 times the homicide rate in his borough. So I'm wondering, he's also calling it a health emergency, but I'm wondering, do those stats hold up citywide? And what more can the police, can the city do with the opioid epidemic?
So in 2016, there were 1,300 overdoses and there were 335 homicides. So if you do the math there, that's about 4 times the murder rate. And we have a comprehensive plan. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago at a press conference with the mayor. And again, it's not just the NYPD. We've added additional. Thanks. We've added additional 84 additional investigators to the Detective Bureau, who we're instituting overdose investigation squads in each and every borough. And then we've also added people to our federal investigative units. And the DOH is helping us make sure that we have each and every one of our police officers that they'll have Narcan or naloxone.
Okay, good time to take a little transition here.
Yeah, that was very artful.
Ask the police executives, do we need to get over to the Brian Moore?
Let me take a moment to acknowledge and thank Assembly Member Alicia Hyman is here, and thank you, and you'll be happy to know the 113 precinct is making historic gains. Well, let's see if we can get the alarm to go off. Thank you. Do your thing. Okay, we're going to pause a moment. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Eric. Okay, do we think that's off? I'm going to be hopeful. Okay, let me just do something up front, but let's get the door closed, please. Okay, let me just say something up front, and then we'll take questions. I think everyone knows there's a vote beginning in the Congress as we speak. And look, this is very clear what's going to happen here. The House of Representatives is about to pass legislation that is plainly cruel and inhumane. Literally taking the first step of taking away health care from the people of this country, and certainly that means the people of this city as well. If this bill becomes law, people will go sick without getting the care they need. People will go bankrupt, families will go bankrupt because they won't be able to afford their health care, and ultimately people will die. If this bill becomes law, people will die. It's as simple as that, and it has to be stopped. We know that one of the underlying motivations at the White House and amongst the Republican leadership in the Congress is what they're really trying to achieve here is they're trying to get rid of the taxes that President Obama and the Congress put on the wealthy that are part of paying for our health insurance system. And one of the underlying motivations is to give that whole group of wealthy people a tax break and to use that money as part of their effort to give even more tax breaks to the wealthy and the corporations. This is the underlying motivation that has to be understood, and it's very cynical because a lot of people are going to be endangered in the process. What it means for New York City, over 1 million people in this city will be at risk of losing their health insurance and therefore their health care. That's just what it means in human terms to begin with, over 1 million people who will not have health insurance, and then we all know what happens when people don't have health insurance and they don't seek care anymore. The human impact on New York City will be horrific. The impact beyond the family level and the individual level on our public hospitals will also be intense. Because right now our public hospitals are struggling to stay afloat. But if more and more of their patients don't have health insurance, that means a lot less resources flowing into our public hospitals. That's going to strain them. That's going to lead to cutbacks in services. And then there's the Collins Amendment. This is the ultimate poison pill. The Collins Amendment means that in New York State only, there will no longer be a responsibility of counties around the state to pay a part of their Medicaid costs, with the exception of New York City. This is an amendment that is biased against New York City, that forces New York City to keep paying a substantial share of Medicaid costs, but doesn't ask any place else in the state to do it. That will therefore mean New Yorkers will be shouldering an unfair burden. New York City taxpayers will be asked to do something that other residents in New York State won't be. It's an unfair burden on New York City taxpayers, and then it also means the state of New York will start cutting back its funding, because it will not be able to shoulder the burden, which is estimated to be about $2.3 billion in resources lost because counties will no longer pay towards Medicaid. There's an extraordinarily negative series of domino effects here that are going to hurt the people in New York City. And we all know this battle will now go to the U.S. Senate, and this is a very different reality in the U.S. Senate. We have two champions there fighting for the people of New York City, Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. Obviously, Senator Schumer is in a particularly powerful position and is very effective at mounting a fight. We'll do everything here in this city to support our senators to stop the repeal of Obamacare, but we also are going to work with mayors all over this country. And I can tell you from talking to a number of my fellow mayors, both Democrat and Republican, they're ready to wage a fight, and they're ready to do everything they can to convince their senators that we cannot repeal the Affordable Care Act without devastating impacts on our cities. And I've literally heard from mayors around the country, they fear that hospitals will close. Public hospitals and voluntary hospitals in their communities will close if the Affordable Care Act is repealed. That's the price of this legislation. That's why it's so important that we stand up and fight it. And there's going to be a battle royale in the U.S. Senate. And when the people of this country recognize that Donald Trump is taking away their right to health care and is taking away insurance for people who have pre-existing conditions, you will see an exceedingly passionate negative response from the people of this country, including a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump. And I think that will be felt in the U.S. Senate. So I wanted to put that forward and then take questions on that or anything else on your minds. Go ahead.
Mayor, I wanted to ask you about your opposition to some legislation that would require lower the amount of decibels that can be made from construction noise next to schools. It's being pushed by some parents at PS 163 on the Upper West Side, and I guess there's some concern among them that you may be opposed to it because it's being built by, it's being pushed by Local 1199, which is donated to your campaign. So I was hoping you could explain why you're opposed to the legislation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems with that question, so I'll break them down. The first time I heard this legislation existed was 5 minutes before this press conference. I have no knowledge of the legislation or who is on which side of it. So I can safely say that whatever concerns my administration has about the legislation have nothing to do with the different forces for and against it, because I didn't know it even existed, nor who those forces are. To the question of legislation, I have not seen it, and I look forward to a fuller analysis. I think the immediate concern is, if we're going to think about any kind of noise level requirements, we have to be realistic about New York City and the amount of noise in New York City, and not create a situation where we can't do any construction for things we need. We need more affordable housing. We need more housing for our senior citizens. We need a lot of things in this city, and we can't create a situation where we're not able to build in our own city. But again, I will withhold comment on the specifics of the legislation because I have not seen it and have not been briefed on it.
Are you concerned about the general issue of like loud noise outside of school?
I'm concerned about noise in the city in general. I'm concerned about anything that has an impact on the educational process of our children. But at the same time, we have a lot we have to get done in this city, and everyone in New York City knows that when there's construction, there'll be a certain amount of noise. We should do everything in the world to limit it, obviously. But we cannot create a situation where, because of a noise requirement, it's impossible to do the construction we actually need. Who else? Marcia.
Mr. Mayor, good government groups say that you're engaging in unequal justice. On the one hand, you have a person who worked for the housing authority who used his official car for an hour to take his mother to buy a car. While illegal, he was docked 10 days' pay and fined of $2,000. On the other hand, you have Commissioner Pont, who took his official car to Maine and other places, 18,000 miles, and is not punished. How is this fair, and what kind of a message does it send about fairness in government?
Each situation is individual. Each situation will be acted on in the appropriate fashion by the Conflicts of Interest Board or whatever other body is necessary. And that will certainly proceed in the cases regarding the Department of Corrections. I don't know about the other situation that you mentioned. I don't know the details of it. But I can say this. I believe fundamentally that Commissioner Pont has done an extraordinary job for this city. He has improved the situation on Rikers Island in a myriad ways. He has made it safer. He has made it more humane. He's taken on one of the toughest jobs and most thankless jobs in city government. He's done it very, very well. I have talked to him directly. I believe 100% he thought he was doing what his staff guided him to do. He thought he was doing the right thing. He never intended to do anything wrong. He obviously came forward immediately and said he would repay any appropriate charges. And then the Conflict of Interest Board will make any further determinations from there. So I want to not compare to situations I don't know about. I want to talk about this situation. I think he was given the wrong guidance. I think he never intended to do anything wrong. And I think he will make sure that things are made whole in the final analysis.
Follow-up questions. Number one, do you think that the Conflicts of Interest Board should punish him? And secondly, you know, it sort of is unbelievable to me that in this day and age, when there are so many ethics questions that involve city government, that you have to sort of live under a rock not to know it's not proper to take a city car and take it out of town and use it for your personal benefit. No matter what your guidance is, something should say to you, hey, that's not the right thing to do.
I understand the question, but I would counter with another reality that's going on in government right now. There's a huge amount you're expected to know. And there's a particular set of rules that go along with folks who are involved in the uniformed services. That's a different set of standards for folks who are in the civilian departments. And there's obviously an understanding that they could be dealing with a crisis situation at any given point. And again, the bottom line is he's not from New York City. He's not from New York City government. He's used to other jurisdictions, and each jurisdiction has a different approach, I should say. But I fundamentally believe he thought he had received the right guidance and was acting on it. And to your first question, the Conflict of Interest Board in each case looks at the individual circumstances, and they judge and they determine if there need to be penalties. And I respect their ability to do that. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I respect their ability to do that. Again, I've covered it. I think
You were wrong.
that's fine. Commissioners will disagree with me sometimes, but the bottom line is Joe Pont's done a great job. He didn't intend to do anything wrong. I strongly believe this. He has already made clear he'll repay whatever costs, and there will be a further process with the Conflict of Interest Board.
Have you made any progress identifying who actually gave him the bad advice?
I have not personally been involved in that effort. I think it came from multiple sources, and I think it was the way the department had done things previously. But here's the bottom line, and this is why I've said publicly I appreciate the DOI investigation. We're now going through every agency to make clear what the proper standards are and to make sure that everyone, whether they're a commissioner or a line worker in that agency, understands very clearly the standard that has to be held. So I'm glad that this was found, and we're going to use it as an occasion to go back across the entire city government, almost 400,000 employees, and make sure that everyone is doing things the right way.
concerns over the tone of the statement from DOI after your appearance on the Brian Lehrer show, where Commissioner Peters essentially said that defense of this was harming the integrity of City Hall. Have you had any conversations, and do you have any concerns about that?
Just disagree with him. But that's the nature of the dynamic between a DOI commissioner and City Hall. It's not surprising. It's been true that way for years and years and decades. But just disagree with his analysis. Yeah.
This weekend, you're planning to go to Vermont, right? And you'll be appearing with Senator Bernie Sanders. Wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you see as your place right now in the progressive movement, and where you think it is nationally, as well as if you have any plans to get involved maybe in 2018 with House races more nationally. What are you planning to do?
I don't have an overall assumption right now. It's 2017, and right now I'm focused on my re-election, and that's what matters most in terms of the political calendar. In terms of everything else, I'm focused on the work day to day in this city, on all the issues facing this city. In terms of the progressive movement, it has to keep building. That's the bottom line. And I think Bernie Sanders is unquestionably one of the great progressives in this country, and he has contributed greatly to the growth of the progressive effort in this nation, and I look forward to working with him in a lot of ways. I got an invitation from the Vermont Democratic Party, and I was honored to accept it. But there is no, central headquarters for the progressive movement. This is a bunch of like-minded people trying in many ways to work together more than ever before. It is a work in progress. The attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act, I think, is going to be a moment where the progressive movement in this country comes to the fore to stop that repeal. So I don't have an easy answer for you, but I want to be involved in any way that's productive in defense of the needs of New York City and defense of changing the approach to government in this city that I think will help New Yorkers and I think will help people everywhere. David.
Can you tell me, why is it appropriate for the city to spend its resources creating a scene for the pilot of a television series?
I don't know the situation you're referring to. I'm sorry.
The Mets. So the event that you held on Friday was created for the pilot episode of a TV series. It has not aired yet.
I have no knowledge of the TV series. It was a simple point, and of course my staff did the work, and my involvement was to show up and honor Dwight Gooden, who I think a lot of New Yorkers would say an exceedingly poignant story, and one that a lot of people care about, rightfully, and a lot of Mets fans, but beyond Mets fans, guy who overcame adversity and overcame drug addiction and has turned his life around and is a very, very positive symbol to this city. And, because of his affliction, never got honored that day when the Mets won the World Series. My only involvement was to honor Dwight Gooden and that team, and that's it. I think it makes total... I'm not disturbed at all, David. I think...
So if you didn't know that that's how you were being used, aren't you disturbed that that's what...
David, I'm just so unconcerned compared to issues that really matter. And in the end, this was about honoring Dwight Gooden and honoring that Mets team. That's all I know, and that's all I care about. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, there was a report that came out today that enlisted 8 ways, 8 measures.
8 measures?
8 ways that decisions that the city could take now in order to protect immigrants from the criminal justice system that leads to deportations. I'm not asking directly of the report because I'm sure that you haven't gotten a chance to look at it, but I want to know, in lieu of the fact that your administration has taken a position in favor of immigrants and you've taken a strong stance against Trump's immigration agenda, can we hear, in terms of substance and measures that you're considering to protect immigrants from the over-policing that leads them to deportations?
I just don't appreciate the question. I have not seen the report, but I just disagree with the premise. And again, this has been asked so many times I can't even count anymore, but if people keep asking, I'll keep repeating it. We have a very clear strategic approach. We're doing what's right for public safety for all New Yorkers. We're not altering our approach to public safety because of the actions of the Trump administration. And by the way, none of those actions have changed the reality on the ground in an appreciable way. The executive order, as you know, has already been found problematic by the court system, and there's been no implementation of the executive order in terms of funding for New York City. The deportations are worrisome, but not discernibly different from what we saw in the previous administration. I've said that many times. The fear levels are much greater, but the practical reality is not that changed. Our strategy is to do what's right for public safety in New York City. We also continue a series of strategies to support our immigrant communities, whether it is not asking documentation status, whether it's providing a whole range of services to people regardless of documentation status, the NYCID card, and now what we announced as part of the budget, legal services to help address deportation, whether someone has been detained or not, who's a New York City resident. That's our package of strategies. We're very, very consistent on that, but we're not changing because we believe our approach to public safety, as this previous part of the press conference illustrates, is effective. Yeah.
Getting back to Marcia's earlier questions on Commissioner Pont, I mean, there have been a number of lower-level municipal employees who've lost their jobs over similar misuse of cars. Is that fair? Do they deserve their jobs back? And is the city opening themselves up to potential litigation?
I can't speak to any previous situations, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to talk about litigation. I don't have a view on that. I have a view on Joe Pont, how he's run his agency, what he's done for New York City, and I believe fundamentally he thought he was following the proper guidance, period. Now, again, he's going to pay back, he said, the money for the mileage and the gas. He is going to, that case will be looked at by the Conflict Interest Board, and they will make a further determination. And I think that's fair and right. I'm not going to compare different situations. Every situation is different. Okay, anything else? Just checking. Media questions? Go ahead.
Reintroducing subsidies bill for renters and homeowners who keep staying in their homes instead of becoming homeless. Would you consider supporting that bill versus?
Wait, are you saying the bill that he put forward? I supported his bill strongly when I went to Albany to do my testimony back in January or beginning of February. The same bill that was already present then, or is this a new thing?
Trying to reintroduce it because it didn't go through last time.
Okay, if it's the same Hevesy bill that I spoke to in January, I support it very strongly, but with the clear stipulation that the state has to address the financial considerations of it and not put those on localities. But the concept's an excellent concept, and I do support it. Yeah.
Do you think it's appropriate for Commissioner Pont to be essentially clocking in from Maine? And do you think, he was there during the week and was getting paid for being on the job at the time? And do you think it's the kind of job that someone can do remotely from like 5 states away?
I've spoken to this before, and I'll speak to it again. This is one of the toughest jobs in city government, and his results are outstanding. And I don't have any problem with the way he did his work. I think he got bad guidance on the use of his car. I think if he had gotten better guidance, he would have followed better guidance. I think he's a person of absolute integrity. His whole life has been about reforming correction systems. It's incredibly difficult work. And this is, I've known a lot of people in public service. I know in my heart he's here to do good, and that's all he wanted to do. And I'm very comfortable he was on top of the action every step along the way. And the results are outstanding. I mean, it really comes down to that's how you judge people ultimately. What did they produce? He produced. So again, I remind you guys, we had a mayor who would go to Bermuda on some point on a Friday and come back on Sunday. He still managed to run the city from Bermuda. I'm not sure I would have done that, but he managed to do it. So let's be consistent about that.
That good results or good intentions mitigate or excuse the misuse of city resources?
I think it's not just good intentions, but believing he had received the appropriate guidance, and nothing countered that. So clearly what this report pointed out, and we're happy about this, is there was a systems problem. Something should have countered it. To Marcia's previous question, you can ask, well, what about each person's perspective? Shouldn't they figure it out for themselves? I would say, again, if you come from a different jurisdiction, this is the first time he's ever worked in New York City. Every jurisdiction is different. I don't think it's so much a given that people would automatically understand all the nuances of the rules, especially if they're in a uniformed service field, which has different rules. But I think the systems were wrong in that department, and they have to be fixed, and we have to make sure that that's true in any other department. There should have been checks and balances that made very clear what the proper standards were.
But don't employees get a handbook when they're given a city card?
Yeah, I don't know I just don't know the details of that, but I think it gets back to the same point. I'm not going to answer the fact question because I don't know. I can say whatever the case, it should going forward be abundantly clear to everyone. From commissioner on down, there's one clear standard, and we're going to enforce that standard. And we are right now going back through every agency to make sure that that standard is being applied properly.
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if you had any conversation with John Katzmatidis as he was deciding whether to run for mayor or not, and with him his deciding not to run, are you seeking his support in your re-election bid?
John is a friend. I have a lot of respect for him. I did not have a conversation during his decision making. I left that to him, obviously. He sent me a very nice text when he decided he wasn't going to run. You know, I look forward to seeing him. I certainly love his support, but he is a Republican, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to support the eventual Republican nominee. Rich, to take us out.
Just back to Commissioner Pont one more time. Did he, when you had a conversation with him, I think you said, if I'm correct in thinking that,
yeah.
Did he seem thunderstruck that somebody called him on this? Was he surprised? Was he...
I don't want to speak for him. I'll only do my own interpretation that I think he thought he was following the guidance he was given. I mean, it's really as simple as that.
What did he say to you? I mean, was he...
Again, I'm not going to speak for him or relay a personal conversation. I'm going to say conversation confirmed to me what I already strongly believe to be the case, that he thought he had been receiving the appropriate guidance and had done things the right way. I've worked with this guy now for 3.5 years. He's one of the highest integrity people I've ever worked with. And it did not surprise me one bit that he thought he was doing things the way it was supposed to be done. He absolutely didn't intend to do anything wrong, and he's going to do everything that is needed to make things right. Thanks, everyone.